Oh hey, yeah, I see you there. Come on in. So, in preparation for Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, we're going to be continuing our journey through the legendary MonsterVerse. We've done Godzilla 2014, but this video is all about the second installment in the franchise, which is Kong Skull Island. So, it's going to be full spoilers. So, settle down, get yourselves comfy, and let's talk about this movie. So, for this movie, they decided to kind of predate Godzilla 2014. Obviously, that being a very kind of like modern day timeline. This movie is actually set in 1973 and is kind of like on the back or off the back of the Vietnam War ending. So it's like, you know, you've got these group of soldiers led by Samuel Jackson and this group of scientists led by John Goodman, who go off to Skull Island to kind of investigate it, really just explore it and see what they can discover. Basically, you know, they're kind of there for, you know, various different reasons, you know, possible kind of cures and different medicines they can find, but ultimately, you know, John Goodman is there to find you know, new creatures and new kaijus and you know, new life and further explore that because he works for Monarch as well. So along for the ride as well, we've got Secret Serviceman turned kind of adventurer explorer Tom Hiddleston, and Brie Larson is also there to take photos and document the whole thing. And essentially, that is basically the plot of the film. They go to Skull Island just to kind of, you know, see what they can discover. And they're kind of, you know, on their way there, they're dropping these like seismic charges. They're just kind of just throwing them to the ground. Obviously, like shit's blowing up. And it's, you know, all the wildlife in there are running away because they're terrified. Not the best first impression, I'll be honest. You know, way to kind of kick things off, you know, for the human race there, guys. Way to make us look like a bunch of dicks. So good work. And obviously Kong apparently feels the same way. So he decides to launch a tree at one of the helicopters, and then you just kind of get this awesome like little sequence where they're just, you know, they're trying to kind of gun him down, almost like a callback to the original movie. You know, where the planes are trying to shoot him down, and he's just absolutely destroying them. So they end up, you know, kind of marooned there, and they're all separated and kind of stranded on Skull Island. And the film is essentially them trying to navigate their way kind of back to each other, and then like escape. But kind of there are ulterior motives at play, which I'll get to in just a second. But one of the strongest parts of this film for me is John C. Reilly's character. And basically the movie actually starts sort of during World War II. So John C. Reilly's character and this Japanese soldier are kind of, you know, shooting at each other, and they're firing at each other, and they both kind of crash land on Skull Island, and they, you know, forced to basically kind of come to blows with each other, and obviously they're trying to, you know, each one's trying to kill the other. And this is literally in the first like few minutes of the film, and we're treated to Kong. He's like, what? He's like, who the hell are you guys? I'm not putting up with this shit. Like, you sit over there, you sit over there. Just calm the fuck down, all right? And basically, kind of once, you know, the gang, you know, flash forward again. So once the gang are kind of exploring through Skull Island, they actually come across John C. Reilly, who is still there. So 28 years later, he's still on Skull Island, and he's obviously become a bit of an expert on like the kind of the native culture and you know, just everything Skull Island. He's like, you know, knows where not to go, you know, who you can trust, and yeah, so he's the guy to know. So John C. Reilly's character, Hank Marlowe, totally didn't just look that up now. So he basically persuades the rest of them, because he's basically been working on this boat, you know, for the last few years, and basically it's not quite finished yet, and you know, because obviously he's just there on his own working on it, and I mean, you think he'd have the time to finish it, you know, 28 years it's a long time, but yeah, I guess not. I guess he had other things to do, you know, maybe he was busy. So he basically convinces, obviously, you know, Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson and everyone else to help him finish the boat so they can all escape. But they're like, well, we've got other guys here. We need to kind of go back and, you know, bring them with us. So it's like, okay. So they obviously go off, you know, kind of and fight their way through. And they eventually team up, you know, meet up with Samuel Jackson and the rest of the soldiers. But along the way, Samuel Jackson's, you know, he's basically, when they first appeared on the island and Kong, you know, took down all the helicopters, obviously a lot of his men died, so he's totally gone psycho, and and he's kind of on this mission to save one of his men, who's played by Toby Kebbell. He plays Jack Chapman, and that's like his whole thing in the movie. He's like, we've got to save Chapman, we've got to save Chapman. Spoiler alert, Chapman's dead. Turns out, one kind of guy all on his own against a bunch of gigantic creatures on an uninhabited island. Turns out, the odds aren't great. So he dies, and they later on they find his well, I'd say his remains is literally just his skull, which still has some kind of burnt flesh and melted flesh on it. So Chapman doesn't make it to the end of this movie. But Samuel Jackson, he's kind of like, well, you know what, I'm not actually really that fussed. I'm actually more interested in killing Kong. So he's like the full-on kind of villain of this movie, and that's his whole thing. He's like, no way, man, like, mankind, we're the superior beings on this planet, and we need to stop them all. And you kind of have this, it's like a bit of a power struggle there, because you have like half the groups. You got like Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, John C. Reilly, and like the scientists, and then like basically the rest of the soldiers are all obviously with Samuel Jackson, because he's in charge, and they kind of just follow his lead, even though they know it's not really the right thing to do. But there's a great little moment where they do kind of turn around and they say, actually, they do come to their senses, and they're like, actually, no, this isn't the right thing to do. And so they then kind of leave him behind. Sure enough, Kong just literally pummels him with a fist. So that's the end of Samuel Jackson. And they escape the island and all live happily ever after, basically. Well, actually, no, they don't all live happily ever after. There's this one soldier. Obviously a lot of the soldiers die, but there's this one guy in particular, and he like tries to do this. They basically kind of run into the boat, and it's like supposed to be this kind of emotional, like heroic moment. And I can't help but laugh every time I see it, because he's like, it's like they're literally home free, and all they got to do is get on the boat. It's literally right there. And he just turns around and is like, actually, you know what, guys, go and live your lives. I'm just going to stay. He's just literally just like, you've already done all the hard bit, mate. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, actually, I can't really be bothered with this staying alive lark, even though I'm already safe. And he decides to just turn around and sacrifice himself to one of these giant creatures. So they're called skull crawlers. Well, that's like the name that John C. Reilly gives them. And you think he's gonna, he's got like these grenades, and he kind of like lets the pins out, and he's like holding them, ready to blow this thing to shit. And it literally just swats him with its tail, and he goes flying off in the other direction. Doesn't even like leave a scratch on this skull crawler, and then you just see him flying in the other direction, and then obviously lets go, and he explodes. So not quite the heroic ending for him, but nonetheless, it was kind of a strange moment. As I say, it's obviously supposed to be heroic, but I can't help but laugh every time I see it. So maybe I'm just a sick bastard. I don't know. But there's a really nice moment, because throughout the movie, Hank Marlowe, he is, obviously talking about, he's like, I've got a wife, and, she was about to give birth to our son, kind of before I came out here. And basically, I've got a fully grown son that I've never met. And that's kind of his whole thing throughout the film. And they even say, like, well, what if they've moved on? And he's like, well, if they have, they have. I just want to see them one more time. That'll be enough for me. I just want to have one last moment with them. And literally, like the credits, it's like as the credits are rolling, you kind of see this like almost like B-roll footage. And it's this really touching moment where he returns home, and he's kind of shaved his beard and stuff, and he's kind of made himself look all presentable. And he's got some flowers, and he's in his uniform there, and his son answers the door, and obviously doesn't know who the fuck this guy is, and doesn't even realise it's his dad. And it's just a really, really touching moment. His wife is there, and it's great actually, because there's a bit when he first sees like Tom Hiddleston and everyone, he's like, oh, you guys look more beautiful than a hot dog and a cold beer on the first game of the season. And that's literally like the last kind of shot of the film is like him sitting on his sofa with a hot dog in one hand, a beer in the other, and he's sitting there watching the first game of the season on the TV. So really nice little touching moment there. So obviously, I didn't really talk about Kong much in that little plot analysis. That's because I'm saving that. So don't you worry, you Kong fans. I haven't forgotten you. Kong is fucking incredible in this movie. Like, I'm not gonna lie, he is so awesome. Like, he's like the ultimate kind of just no zero fucks given. He'll just destroy like whatever creature is causing him some hassle, giving him some grief. And then he's just like, yeah, fucking, all right, you done? Yeah, all right, I'm off now. And he just goes, trudging off and just goes and chills out somewhere else for a bit. He'll just sit there, have a drink in the, in like the big lake. He'll just sit there and then like some octopus, like massive fucking like kraken type thing, will just be sitting under there. And, he's like, oh God, I can't even have a drink without this fucking, and he just like grabs it, pummels it to shit, and then it just sits there and eats it, just has it as a little snack. And that's pretty fucking cool, I'm not going to lie. And one thing I've always loved about Kong is, yeah, he's this, giant, I mean, obviously they, call him an ape and stuff, but he's not. I mean, he's a being, and he's so, like, I think a lot of the humanity of this whole franchise comes from Kong. We'll see it, obviously, we'll talk about it in the later films, but, like, this movie really does emphasize, like, the humanity in Kong. Like, he's not just this giant creature, like, he's a being, and he cares, and he feels things, and much in that, like, kind of Fay Ray style, Brie Larson is kind of his, like, he protects her in this movie. There's a lot of moments when, she's in danger, or she's there to help him. Like, there's this bit when there's this kind of giant, I don't know if it's like a big antelope or something, but it's kind of being crushed by one of the helicopters that crashed, and it's trapped under it, and she's trying to save it. She's trying to lift the kind of, like, the end of the helicopter up, and she's obviously struggling because it's fucking heavy, and it's only her doing it. And then suddenly Kong just appears and just lifts it up and just like chucks it away. And he's like, kind of looks at her for a minute, just to say, you're all right, you're all right. And there's just a lot of nice little moments like that in it. And we kind of saw that in, like, with Godzilla 2014. There's a nice shot when Godzilla's like laying there in the street, and he just looks at Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he doesn't, hurt him. He's got no, like, there's no kind of malicious, like, intent there at all. He's just, there's a real humanity to these creatures. They are like protectors of the earth. They just protect their territory, and that's what, that's kind of the whole argument with, like, Samuel Jackson's character is, like, he feels that Kong is this threat, but he's like, well, no, he's just protecting his territory because we came in and destroyed his home, basically. So there's definitely a message there. A lot of the time, well, most of the time, I think we as humans, we're the real monsters. But that's me getting deep, and that's not what this video is about. So this movie really assembled a marvelous cast, I have to say. See what I did there. Like, the cast of this movie, I mean, you've got literally Loki, you've got Captain Marvel, you've got Nick Fury, you've got the Nova Corps guy, you've got Doctor Doom in there as well. There's so many Marvel actors in this movie that crammed in, and so many other great actors in this as well. Just like, that's the thing about this, like, there's just so much, it's such a great, like, ensemble cast. Like, even the kind of the lesser, characters in this that only get a few lines of dialogue, like, they're all great as well. So moving swiftly on to the positives of this movie, first of all, I love the tone. Like, just stylistically, they went for a very different approach to Godzilla 2014, which is very bleak and very kind of, dark and gloomy. This movie is a lot more vibrant. It's just a much kind of more, like, it's definitely, I would say it's more violent. I think it's definitely more kind of gory, and, some of the kills, like some of the creature, like the way they kill the soldiers in this movie is gory as fuck, really. And yeah, I love the tone of it as well. There's definitely more of an emphasis on the humor. And it just overall, I think it works really well. Another thing I love about this movie as well is just, like, the amount of, like, different creatures we get to see in this. There's everything from the skull crawlers, obviously, to Kong. You get these, like, giant spider, kind of creepy fucking things. And then, as I say, like, these kind of big, like, I don't know what they are really, but like antelope type things. And there's just lots of, like, just really interesting just creatures, and it's nice that they kind of expand that world a little bit more. And again, I love the setting of having it in the 70s as well, which I think is really interesting. And yeah, just overall, I think the story is really strong here. I think there's some really great emotional moments, as I say, particularly with John C. Reilly's character. But just, like, again, like, there's some real just strong kind of themes in here about, kind of like just nature and why you should leave things alone. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's very much like that mentality. It's just like Skull Island, obviously it's this kind of violent place because there's all these big creatures there, but it's so beautiful as well, and it's just like there's a reason why it's like this untouched kind of thing. And by the end of the movie, basically, all the survivors agreed to just never kind of mention they were even there, because they don't want the rest of the world to know about it, and they don't want other people going there and just kind of upsetting the land. Basically, they don't want Kong to be bothered. They just want to they respect him enough, and he saved them, and they just want to leave it as it is. So getting on to the mixed aspect of the movie now. Obviously, I'd say the cast is incredible. Like, the cast is all really great. But I think the problem whenever you have a large ensemble cast like this, there's always going to be certain characters that just don't really get a time to shine, and other characters that will. I mean, obviously, looking at the names on this, we know Tom Hiddleston is like the main hero. He's going to survive. Brie Larson, she's obviously going to survive. And there are just certain kind of traits like that. So obviously they get a lot more focus than other characters do. The movie actually, like, when it kind of jumps then to the 70s after that little, prelude bit, in World War II, the movie like picks up with John Goodman, like his character, and you kind of think like they make out like he's going to be quite a big part to the story and quite a big part to the film. And to be honest, once they meet up with everyone else, he's there for he's kind of important for like the first maybe like 15-20 minutes or so once they recruit everyone. And as soon as they get to Skull Island, you pretty much forget he's there. And it's literally like, with that soldier that I was talking about earlier that sacrifices himself and then gets knocked out of the way. Like, even he looks surprised to like have made it that far. Like, even he's like, oh shit, I'm still alive. Actually, you know what? It's almost like the film, like, actually, yeah, we don't really need you anymore, mate. You've kind of served your purpose. So he's like, oh yeah, I'll just fucking just go and die then. So there's a lot of that. Like, it's very expendable, which again, it's in the kind of the mixed category because that can be fun. That can be part of the interest as well. The intrigue in the movie is like, you don't know who's going to survive and who's going to die. But also, I think that, a lot of characters perhaps didn't get their time to shine like they should have done. There's some really great characters in there, but obviously then you'd end up with like a 4-hour movie, and, that would be too much. So moving on finally to the negatives of the movie. I, for one, do feel like Samuel Jackson's character is kind of like, some of his motivations felt a bit forced to me. Like, I didn't feel fully like, it's like, okay, I get why you're pissed off with Kong, but at the same time, it's your own fucking fault. Like, do you know what I mean? So it almost felt a bit like, okay, we need a villain in this movie. Oh, let's just make his character the villain. And it's like, I kind of see where he's coming from, but also I don't really like. So that didn't really fully work for me, if I'm honest. So overall, Kong Skull Island is a really awesome entry in this franchise, a really underrated one again. I think with all the kind of the hoo-ha of the most recent movies coming out, this is a movie that a lot of people don't really talk about, to be honest. And I really think that people should, if you haven't seen it, 100% recommend it. Go check it out. It's a real, just absolute blast to get through. I'd say there's some silly moments in there that you can, you kind of roll your eyes at a little bit. But if you look beyond that, and I think I think you'll get a good kick out of this, especially if you like these kind of movies in the first place. So highly recommend it. And with that in mind, I'm going to give it a rating of 4 Kongs out of 5. All right, guys, thank you so much again for checking this video out. I really do appreciate it. So this Monsterverse train is going to keep on a rolling. So now we've got Kong Skull Island down and out of the way. We're obviously going to be moving on to the third movie in this franchise, which is Godzilla King of the Monsters. So that video is coming up next on the channel, so make sure you stick around for that. If you did enjoy this one, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and all that other crap. Thank you again for spending the time watching the video. If you appreciate my thoughts, then let me know below. And if you didn't, then again, let me know what you thought about the movie, and I appreciate you watching and checking it out anyway. So yeah, until next time, guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. Farewell.